Hello everyone, my name is Dan Bartels and I am Alliance Enterprises Aware Analytics Product Manager. And thank you for joining me today. I'm coming to you from my home office in Tacoma, Washington. And I imagine that you are watching this video from your home office as well. So again, thanks for joining me. I have an exciting presentation ready for you. I hope that you're going to find it beneficial and provide value to your agency and your ability to track your common performance measures. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to take a look at understanding how we're performing throughout the year for a given common performance measure. The last thing that we want to do when we're measuring our common performance measures and assessing our data that we're submitting to RSA is we don't want to find out at the end of the year that we underperformed what our negotiated values are, right? We want to know that as soon as we can if we're underperforming a target or a agreed upon value. And so that's what we're going to do with this presentation. We're going to demonstrate how we can not only establish a plan that allows us to track our performance for every month, but it allows us also to see if that performance is above or below a plan, right, or a target value. So again, thanks for joining me. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We're going to be leveraging Excel and Tableau, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Okay, so what we see here is a template that we'll be able to leverage for creating a plan. Now, I'm going to set up a sort of stage the problem here, and this works real well because we're going to be taking a look at program year 2020, the measurable skill gains common performance measure. And we are actually in program year 2020. That started July 1st of 2020. And so let's say hypothetically that we earned 15 measurable skill gains in July, we earned 10 in August, we earned 20 in September. Now, the question I propose to you is that good or bad? Having earned 45 measurable skill gains after the first quarter of the program year, is that above or below plan? Are we on target to reach our plan? Well, first we have to establish a plan, right? So let's say we are a large state agency and we expect that in program year 2020 that we will actually earn 600 measurable skill gains. Okay? And so now that I present that we have earned 15, 10, and 20 in the first 3 months for a total of 45, I can present the same question, and that is, how are we performing? Is this a good value, right? And the reason why we can't answer that question is because the amount of measurable skill gains is not equally distributed for each month. We don't, on average, we're not earning the same number of measurable skill gains every month. We're earning predominantly, we see the most measurable skill gains occur in May and June. And so, again, they're not evenly distributed, which makes it difficult for us to determine if this amount here of 45 in relation to a goal of 600 is good or bad. And I guess I'm even hesitant to refer to it as good or bad. I think I'd rather refer to it as sort of above or below a plan, right? Above or below a target value. Okay, so next, I'm going to go ahead and expand this spreadsheet and show you how we're going to, one, create a plan for our program year 2020, and then also track to that plan, ultimately giving us the ability to answer the question after any 1 month as far as, are we above or below a plan, right? Are we above or below a target? And a couple of things here. Let me say, I know that our negotiated value with RSA, we're negotiating a rate, correct? We're negotiating a measurable skill gains rate. However, going through the exercise in this fashion is a little bit more standard to create a plan based on a count or a number. The second part of this presentation, though, we will look at repeating this same exercise. However, we will be using a percent to do it. But to start off, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this example of creating a plan using a target of 600. Okay, so our approach is going to be to look at previous year's data. We do have that available for us. We can look at how did we perform in previous program years. So we can use that information in the past to create a plan for the future. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Tableau here, and I have some data staged for us. The data that you see here is dummy data, if you will. However, it is reflective of data that we would, patterns that we would see in actual agency data. So although this data is fictitious, the patterns that you see are similar to what you would see at your own state agency, I expect. All right, so here we see we have a report, and this report is measurable skill gains by month. This report is for program year 2019. I have the ability to toggle to 2018. And I can see in doing that when I toggle between the two program years. So I can see in the past two program years, I have a similar pattern, and that is that we earn a lot of our measurable skill gains in the last 2 months of the program year. Whether I'm looking at program year 2018, right, 301 and 326, or if I'm looking at program year 2019, 238, 206. We earned a little less between the program years, but our percent of total for May and June contains over half of our measurable skill gains earned. And so what we can do is we can actually take this pattern that we're seeing and apply it to our target value to create a plan for program year 2020. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and copy this information and then bounce back to Excel. I'm going to grab these values here and paste them into our baseline data. And you can see once I do this, once I create this baseline of data, that a few calculations are then generated. These two columns here, first off, we identify what percent of total are our values for each of these months. So for example, the way that I can read just this section here for 2019 is that in 2019, we earned 27 measurable skill gains in the month of July, and 27 is 4.8% of our total value of 562. Similarly, in program year 2019, we earned 28 measurable skill gains in the month of August, and 28 is 5% of 562. And so that formula is repeated for each month, and we can see indeed that in May and June we received 42.3% of our measurable skill gains and 36.7% respectively for May and June. And so again, the majority of our measurable skill gains are occurring in May and June. And so the next column we want to look at is our plan column. And so now I'm hopping over to this section that is program year 2020. And our plan is based off of our target value here. We set a target value of 600, and then we applied our 2019, the pattern in our 2019 data to our plan. So, for example, if our target is 600, and I ask myself the same question, what is 4.8% of 600? And the answer to that is 29. Similarly, 5% of 600 is 30. If I go all the way down to May, I can see that 42.3% of 600 is 254. And lastly, 36.7% of 600 is 220. And I can see also that when I sum the value of my plan, it equals 600, which is my target. And so now I have a plan that's based off of monthly performance. Now I don't have to wait until the end of the quarter or the end of the year to find out how I'm doing. I can assess my performance after every month. And so now we could answer the very original question we had established, and that is a value of 15, 10, and 20 for a total of 45, is that good or bad, right? Or stated in another way, are we performing above or below our target? And I can see that looking at the month of July, we had a plan. We planned to get 29 MSGs. We actually got 15, which is a variance of 14 below plan. And in August, I can see that we were had an even larger variance from our plan. We planned to get 30 MSGs, and we only got 10. So now we're at that is a variance of 20, which would have been a total variance of 34. You can see that in September, we actually did much better than we planned to do. We planned to get 5, we got 20 for a variance of 15, and I could see all along that my total variance from plan is this value right here, which is the sum of this column. And so right now, after 3 months, I have a variance of negative 19. So the benefit of this is that it allows us to assess how we're performing after each program, after each month of the program. And in doing that, in being able to make that assessment, so in this example here, I can say, we're 20, about 20 below where we expected to be. And it's a recognition that perhaps in the upcoming months, we need to take a look at our operations and get a better feel for how we're performing, and if there are any areas where we can maybe modify our operations, maybe add additional staff, right? Whatever that solution might be, this at least lets us know it's time to consider these operational changes. It's time to at least have that conversation. Because if we continue with this pattern, we risk being too far below our target value before, without enough time to make any changes. So let's say hypothetically here, we recognized after 3 months, after 1 quarter, that we are below where we expect to be. If we expect to have a target value of 600, we are below that, right? I'm able to see that right here, that based on our plan, we're below that. And so we do make some operational changes, whatever that might be. Maybe we start having weekly meetings with our field managers, and we're tracking very closely those cases or participants that we expect to earn measurable skill gains, and are really tracking things and on top of our day-to-day operations. And in doing that and having those weekly meetings, we start to notice an increase in our performance. And so let's say we earn 10 measurable skill gains in October, which is 4 above our plan. We're still down, but now we're starting to see a better performance in relation to our plan. So again, we hypothetically earned 10 in November, and let's say we earned 25 in December, and January, we had a nice month in January. I can see for these last 5 months here, we're performing ahead of our plan, and now, lo and behold, our overall target at the end of January, we are actually 10 measurable skill gains ahead of our plan. Now, if we didn't have a plan, and I was simply to say, okay, so at the end of January, we have 110 measurable skill gains, We have a target of 600. Are we ahead or below plan? And we can't answer that question. We need to anchor that answer based on a plan. That's this column. And the best plan that we can create for future years is to look at past year's performance. And that's what we did here. We used program year 2019 to create a baseline, and then we're creating this percent of total calculation and applying this percent of total for each month to give us that plan. So let's say we continue to achieve or obtain our measurable skill gains, and at the end of April we are right around plan. We're 14 above it, but the two big months, right? The two big months that we really need to pay attention to are May and June. And so let's say hypothetically we have a little bit lower performance than expected in May, and I can see here we're actually now down 54 cases, 54 measurable skill gains. And it is late in the program. Nonetheless, we still have some time to make up this, what is an overall difference of 40, right? And so even though it's late in the program year, we only have 1 month left, at least we know how many we are behind our plan. And we know that we are planning to get So for the month of June, we know that we are planning to get 220 cases. And we also know that year to date, program year to date, we are behind 40, which would mean we would have to get 260 cases in June, which is a high order, but we know what we need to do. It's better to know what we need to do, better than to have a high goal and know what it is than not to know what goal we have. And so let's say we hit a home run, 275 cases. For the month, we outperformed our plan by 55, and more importantly, we outperformed our program year-to-date value of 600 by 15. And so again, I think probably as I look at this spreadsheet here, and this spreadsheet is available for you to download. As I look at this, the most important part of this spreadsheet, in my opinion, is our baseline data, because our baseline data creates our plan, or our percent of total, which is used for our plan. So one thing that I might consider is to create a baseline project or a baseline value set from maybe program year 2018 or even 2017, or I could use a combination of all three. You can use whatever values you want here. You just want them to reflect what you're seeing in your program. Again, our historical data is the best indicator for what our future data is that we would expect it to look like. And I chose program year 2019 simply because it is the last program year, and this is a new, operationally, this is somewhat new. I'd be hesitant to use our first program year because we were still definitely establishing our operations around this. And in 2018, we're fine-tuning our operations. And so that's why I chose to use program year 2019 to create, to use for our plan. However, we can definitely use 2018 or anything else that we would like. And to do that, I simply would grab that data from 2018. So here I'm going to go ahead and select all and copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And now this is my program year 2018 data. I can put it in my baseline and paste options. And what it's going to change is all of these calculated fields. And so it's going to change my percent of total slightly, and that consequently changes my plan. And so I can see that my numbers are slightly different than they were when I was using program year 2019 as my baseline, but it just gives me that second perspective as far as, using different sets of data to establish that plan. Now, to get back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is that this value of 600, while it may be, nice to say that that's our target number of measurable skill gains for program year 2020, we are actually being assessed on our measurable skill gains rate, not the number of measurable skill gains we obtain or achieve, but that rate. That's what we're negotiating with RSA, is a measurable skill gain rate. And so the next part of the presentation is we're going to do this same exercise, but we're going to use it for a percentage. And so this is a little bit easier, I think, to establish sort of the rhythm or the pattern on how we're achieving using previous year's data to create a plan for the current year. It's easier to track and follow when we use whole numbers versus percents. But given that we are expected to achieve a measurable skill gain rate or a percentage, we do need to repeat this exercise using percentages. So for part 2 here, we're going to go ahead and create this, do this exercise for a percentage, and hang in there with me. It does look different than what the exercise we currently went through. It's a little bit more complicated. We're also going to take a look at a couple additional charts in Tableau because similar to one of the things that we see is that with the large number of measurable skill gains happening in May and June, when we start to look at our measurable skill gain rate after July or August or September, it's very low. It's very low. So if we would hypothetically, in the example, we're going to establish a measurable skill gain rate of 30% in July and August, we're only expecting it to be around 3 or 4%. And so it can be a little bit, not necessarily confusing, but I think it emphasizes the importance of establishing a plan and knowing how we're performing in relation to that plan. Okay, so for our second half of the presentation, we have a similar spreadsheet here. This is a little bit larger, a few more columns, but the information that we need to enter into the spreadsheet, again, is highlighted in green here. And you'll notice that similar to last time, we have a baseline value that we want to provide, and then we have our actual measurable skill gains earned throughout the program year. And this is the one new column that we need to establish in order to be able to assess our performance as a measurable skill gains rate. Again, that's in comparison to a measurable skill gain count. But now that we're comparing it to a measurable skill gains rate, we need to know what our measurable skill gains rate is after each month. So in addition to our baseline data and our actuals, we're going to provide both actual measurable skill gains earned throughout each month, as well as what our measurable skill gain rate is at the end of that month. And we're going to see some interesting results here. Let's go ahead and bounce back over to Tableau. Here we were looking at our measurable skill gains by month, but in order to identify, well, what is our measurable skill gain rate? We need not only to know what our total number of measurable skill gains earned in each month is, but we need to know what our denominator is, how many participants qualify for a measurable skill gain. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at a report that we have staged and ready. And this is what our data looks like from a cumulative perspective, which I refer to as year to date, program year to date in this instance. So this report here looks at the number of participants that qualify for a measurable skill gain. Before we were looking at the number of participants that earned a measurable skill gain. Now, in order to have a rate or create a monthly rate, we need to know the number that qualify after each month. All right, so next, let's take a look at these two reports in a dashboard format. So here you can see I have, and now these are both, originally we were looking at the data this way, and this is data presented as far as the number of measurable skill gains earned for that month. You can see it goes up and down. And then this report here is year to date or cumulative style, where at the end of July we earned 27. At the end of August we were up to 55. You can see these two reports side by side in this dashboard here. You can see that we earned 27 in July. In August we earned 28, and that for a total of 55, a total of 60. But you can see, so we can see at the end of program year 2019, we actually earned 557 measurable skill gains. And now I'm going to show you that denominator report again. And we had a total number that qualify for a measurable skill gain of 1,741. And now if I look at those two reports next to each other, here is our cumulative or program year to date number of measurable skill gains, and here is the number of measurable skill gains number of participants that qualify for a measurable skill gain. And so one thing that makes this unique, that makes this exercise unique, and I would say really creates a demand for needing to do it, is the pattern we see, and that is that at the end of July, at the end of month 1 of our program year, an awful lot of our participants, a large percent of our total participants, already have qualified for earning a measurable skill gain. We can see that for program year 2019, that after 1 month, we have just over 1,000 that have qualified for a measurable skill gain. Now, at the end of the program year, our total number of participants that qualify for a measurable skill gain is 1,700, 17 and a half. And so we see about a 70% increase from July through to June with our qualifying for a measurable skill gain. But when we look at our count of measurable skill gains, we see a increase of 20-fold. From 27 to 557 is about a 20-fold increase, whereas with our denominator, or just those qualifying, we only see a 0.7% increase. And so this report here, when we want to know what our rate is for a program year after each month, it's going to look similar to this. We'll go ahead and demonstrate that or show that. Okay, so this, you can see here, these are the first two, the total number of measurable skill gains earned, the total number of participants that qualify for a measurable skill gain, and what that rate looks like after each month. So after the month of July, our measurable skill gain rate is only 2.7%. And that is because we have such a large denominator. So many of our participants qualify on day 1 of the program year. And our denominator doesn't get that much larger, especially in relation to our numerator, to our having participants earn those measurable skill gains throughout the year. So before we proceed any further, I thought it would be beneficial to take a look at the definitions that we have for our measurable skill gains numerator and denominator. And this document is provided by RSA. It includes a plain text definition as well as the technical specifications for these data elements. And so in plain text, though, I can understand that our measurable skill gains denominator, that this is defined as the number of program participants who, during the program year, are in an education or training program that leads to a recognized post-secondary credential or employment. And so that is how we're defining our measurable skill gain denominator. And the numerator is the same as the first half here is the same as the denominator. So this first half here is captures what is expressed in our denominator. And it also has this second half, which is and who are achieving measurable skill gains based on attainment of at least one of the 5 types of gains. And it goes on to list those 5 different types of ways that a participant can earn a measurable skill gains. And so this field right here, this is the technical spec, and this is what allows us to create those measures in Tableau. And so I'll go ahead and hop back over to Tableau and just have a single report on the screen. So when I'm looking at all of these data elements here, these were all hand created or programmed to reflect how we're defining, in this instance, a measurable skill gain. So this is each one of these participants earned a measurable skill gain through one of those 5 different ways that were expressed in our definition. And so each one of these data elements here then is reflective of just that month. That's how we're able to create this report here. All right. So having a little bit better idea, just backtracking there a little bit better idea as far as how we're defining our numerator and denominator, or earning a measurable skill gain versus qualifying for a measurable skill gain. Helpful to put that in context, but in doing that, in creating these first 2 reports, it then allows us to create our measurable skill gains rate for the program year to date. And that is simply our numerator, the number of measurable skill gains, divided by the number of participants that qualify. So I can see after July in 2019, at least, program year 2019, in July, I have a very low measurable skill gain rate. It goes up slightly in quarter 2, slightly in quarter 3, and I can see by quarter 4, it really comes into focus. And so again, I can use the data in this report right here as my baseline data. Similar to what we had done before, we're going to do this exercise again. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and now I'm going to paste this information over here, and then I'll go ahead and grab it and paste it in our baseline. And so you can see our values here of starting in 2.7, ending in 32. This reflects our 2019, what our actuals were in 2019. So now it becomes our plan. Let's say, hypothetically, that we've already established with RSA that we are going to achieve a 30% measurable skill gains rate. So this becomes our target value, similar to how last time we were saying we were going to earn 600 measurable skill gains. Now we're saying, well, we actually need to tie that 600 to a rate. So now we're saying, well, we will earn a 30% measurable skill gains rate. Now to create our plan, we're doing that same calculation, which is a percent of total, and we're applying that to our baseline data here. So if our plan is to get a 30% measurable skill gain rate, we're using this pattern that we're seeing in 2019, and we're applying it to our 2020 target of 30%. So I can see that 2.7% in 2019 is equivalent to 2.5%, slightly lower, and that's because we have a slightly lower target than we did at the end of program year 2019. So this column here, now you can see this is how I would expect us to perform throughout program year 2020. And that is our performance now expressed as a measurable skill gain rate. And so our plan is 2.5%, so on and so forth. By the end of May, I'm expecting us to have a 20% measurable skill gain rate. And then by the time we hit June, I'm expecting us to match our rate of our negotiated value of 30%. We have a few additional columns in here that we'll go ahead and hold off on discussing for now, as well as these two columns here. We'll talk a little bit more about those briefly, but let's go ahead and fill in some data for our actual program year-to-date rate, in addition to providing our actual measurable skill gains earned in program year 2020. So I'm going to bounce back to Tableau, and I have some data staged for us here for program year 2020. And let's go ahead and take a look at, let's take a look at those number of measurable skill gains earned for program year 2020. So I can see I have 19 at the end of July, 37 at the end of August, 45 at the end of September, and that's where I get this 19, 37, and 45. And now let's see what that equals with our measurable skill gain rate. I have after July, I have 2.3%. After August, 4%, 4.6. And so let's go ahead and 2.3%. Oh goodness, was it 4, 4.6? Yes, 2.3, 4, and 4.6 in program year 2020. And so these now become my actual measurable skill gain rate at the end of each of these months. And so what we're looking at now, I'm going to go ahead and clear this data. What we're looking at now is we have a plan. So if I was to say to you at the end of July, not knowing any of this information that we're already privileged to, if I was to say, hey, at the end of July, we had a measurable skill gain rate of 2.3%, and we have an agreement with RSA, a negotiated value of 30%, are we doing good or bad, right? That same question, are we above or below our plan? Well, we don't know unless we create a plan. We don't know how this 2.3% is unless we create a plan. And so, by having this plan here, I can now say, well, our plan at the end of July was to be at 2.5%, and we're actually at 2.3%. And so we're a little bit below plan. But how much? Knowing that we are expected to be at 2.5% and we are actually at 2.3%, how much, right? It's hard to get a feel for how much we are above or below plan. And that's because here it only looks like we're only 0.2 below plan, but what does that equate to? And so it helps us if we can express this back in the sense of a count. And so that's what these two columns here are. So what this column here is saying, expected number of MSGs, is that if we had a plan of 2.5%, we'd actually expect to have 21 measurable skill gains at the end of July versus 19. And so then the variance simply is our expected value less our actual value, or sorry, vice versa, our actual value less our expected value. You can see here we have a negative variance, -2. And so what these two columns help us do is it helps us turn from working with percents into having a better feel for our data using raw counts. And that's why we approached this demonstration by doing this exercise from a place of looking at just our counts. Because if we would have done the exercise here, starting here, it's just harder to follow when we're saying, all right, so for example, at the end of September, we had a plan. Well, 4.6, 4.6. We're pretty much right on plan. At the end of August, we had a plan to have a measurable skill gains rate of 4.5%. And if I was to tell you where we are currently at 4%, you know we were below our plan, but you don't really know, like, how far below does that mean? How far below? It's only 0.5% difference, but as a percentage, 4.5% as a percent to 4 that's significantly more. That's closer to 10% difference. And we can see by converting this to a count that we would actually expect, if we were expecting to be at 4.5% rate, we would also expect to have 43 measurable skill gains at the end of August versus 37. So we're below plan by 6. And September, we have a little bit better month. We're below plan by 1. But you can see that, at this point, we have a sense of how we're performing. We can say, after the first quarter, we're pretty much on our plan. Now, if you're like me, that might, for me, I might be a little nervous still, because I would say I'd like us to be above plan. Being right at plan is okay, certainly better than being below plan, right? Nonetheless, we have that time. Again, the benefit of this, the purpose of this presentation is to identify a mechanism in which we can identify or capture how we're performing throughout the program year. So now after quarter 1, I know we're performing about how we expected to. We're right on target to reach this 30% measurable skill gain rate. And we wouldn't necessarily think that just looking at these first 3 values, that after the first quarter, our measurable skill gain rate is at 4.6%. If we didn't have any of this other information, we might be nervous and say, gosh, we're significantly below 30%. Why are we so much lower? Why is our measurable skill gains rate only at 4.6% as of September? Well, now we have the benefit of saying, that's actually our plan. And the reason why we have such a low measurable skill gains rate after the first quarter of data collection is because so many of our participants qualify right away in the program, right? That's why we see this skewed measurable skill gain rate go kind of have this exponential curve at the end of it, is because our numerator is finally catching up with our denominator, but not until those last 2 months. And so it's helpful to know, hey, even though we're only at 4.6% at the end of September, that's where we expected to be. Okay, let's go through this exercise here and see how it turns out for the remaining months of data collection. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab, for program year 2020, I'm going to go ahead and grab our actual count of measurable skill gains. So again, that's Control A for select all, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. I'm going to copy and then paste values. Okay, so in addition to needing to know what our values are, we also need to know what our rate is, and providing this second part of the calculation will then allow us to see how we're performing in accordance to plan. So now I'm looking at this report here. Okay, so the second quarter we had 5.3, 6.2, 7.7. And so I can see, hey, we are now, we had that talk with our team. We started to focus on our measurable skill gains. We wanted to find ourselves a little bit above our plan after Q1. And so now we can see after December, after Q2, we have a measurable skill gains rate of 7.7, much below our 30, but we only plan to have a measurable skill gains rate of 6.3. We are actually 15 cases above where we would expect to be. So now you can see we're starting to pull away a little bit from what our plan is, which is great. And one thing that's slightly different, in our previous example, you might recall that we had this totals row. And with this spreadsheet, we don't have this totals row. And that's because this spreadsheet is expressed as year-to-date values. So the last row of data that we have is actually our total. At this point in time, we have a total of 85 measurable skill gains. We have a total of 70 as far as what we would expect, and a total variance of 15. All right, so let's plug in the next 3 quarters of data. So that's 7.8. We actually go down 7.4, 7.2. Okay, so I can see here after Q3 that we went down slightly. I'm looking at this variance from plan. We were up 15, now we're up 13. We're still up. Here our February performance had dropped us a little bit. We went from a measurable skill gain rate of 7.8 to 7.4. We have a plan of 7.2. So we're ahead of plan, but by only 2 cases. And I can see now at the end of March, we are a plan of 7.3 and we're at 7.2. We have 92 total measurable skill gains where we would expect to have 94 for a difference of 2. All right, let's see how we're going to perform in those last 3 months. 7.4, then we jump to 26. And that's the big one, right? That May timeline is the big one. And so I can see at the end of April, we're up on our total plan by 4 cases. And in May, we have a great month. We expected to get 275 measurable skill gains, and we actually got 356, or this is year to date, but we are significantly beating our expected number of measurable skill gains by 81. So we are significantly above plan. That is fantastic, right? A actual rate of 26 versus a planned rate of 21. And so for our very last month, I can see that we end in program year 2020, we end with a 30.5% measurable skill gain rate. That calculates our last 2 values here. We have a total number of measurable skill gains earned of 439, and we would expect, with a 30% measurable skill gain rate, we would expect to have a total number of 432. So that leaves us very close to our plan. We're only 7 above our plan, but we are above our plan. We have matched our plan, which is 30%, which would be a expected number of measurable skill gains of 432, an actual number of measurable skill gains of 439, leaving us with a 30.5% measurable skill gain rate at the end of the program year. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show you is these 3 fields here. These are all calculated fields, and they are looking at what 90% or 75 or 50% of our plan would look like as far as an MSG rate is. And so if we had a plan of 2.5% for the month of July, 90% of that would look like 2.2. 75% would look like 1.9, 50% would look like 1.2. We could then take a look at what our measurable skill gains rate was after the month of July, see that it was at 2.3%. We can see we're slightly above that 90% threshold. We're below our plan, but we're slightly above our 90% threshold. And the reason why we decided to use this 90% and this 50% value here, these are important thresholds for the program. And I'm going to go ahead and jump over to a document. This is the TEAGLE 1119. That is Training Education Guideline Letter, or Training and Employment Guidance Letter. Almost had it there. Training and Employment Guidance Letter, released February 6th of 2020, referred to as 11-19. I'm going to scroll that back down here, and I'm on page 24 here, and we can see that different ways where a program would be considered of missing or underperforming your negotiated value, or what turns out to be your adjusted level of performance here. I can see that if any performance failure occurs for an individual indicator score is below 50%, that would become sort of means for being flagged and needing to make improvements for the following year. So if any one of, for a state, for any one of the WIOA programs, if any one of the common performance measures is below 50%, that's flagged as failing a significant level below expected level of performance. So this 50% becomes a critical threshold, as well as this 90% marker. So performance failure occurs if any overall state indicator score is below 90%. Going back to here, so if at the end of the program year we didn't end up with an actual MSG rate of 30.5, it would be good to know as a sort of a secondary concern, did we at least hit that 90% mark? Because that's important too, and we definitely want to make sure we're hitting that 50% mark. So that's why these two columns are provided, and then I just added this third one here as sort of an in-between, since there's a lot of difference between 50 and 90. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, I know that the conference is going to provide an opportunity for a live meeting where you can ask me any of those questions that you might have. And know that you can also connect with me. I provided my email address here, dan.bartels@allianceenterprises.com. I also provided my LinkedIn address here. I would love to connect with you and extend my network in the VR space. So don't hesitate to reach out to me through either one of those channels. We also have here, this is a QR code. If you're not familiar with this, you can, on your smartphone, use a scanner to scan this code, and it will bring you to Alliance's homepage. And so I encourage you to do that as well, and check out the Alliance Enterprises homepage and see all the great products that we have to offer. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully next year we'll be seeing you in person, but so glad and excited that we're at least able to connect through our technology and our conferences via these different video sharing platforms. So all right, until next time, you take care. Thank you very much.